A few years ago, I was sitting with a group of people when someone made a statement that everyone seemed to agree with. One by one, heads started nodding. People jumped in with their own opinions, building on the same idea. The strange thing was that I didn't actually agree. Not completely anyway. But when my turn came, I smiled, nodded, and said something vague that sounded supportive. Nobody challenged me. Nobody argued with me. The conversation moved on, and from the outside, it looked like a completely normal interaction. But on the drive home, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Not because the topic mattered. It was something small. What bothered me was the realization that I had traded my honest opinion for a few seconds of approval. The cost seemed tiny, yet somehow it felt expensive. Most people think confidence disappears after a major failure. They imagine confidence being destroyed by public embarrassment, rejection, or some dramatic life event. But what if confidence doesn't disappear all at once? What if it leaks away quietly? What if every time you hide who you are, every time you pretend to agree, every time you silence yourself to avoid judgment, you pay a small fee? A tax. A tax on your personality. A tax on your authenticity. A tax on your confidence. I call it the personality tax. The personality tax is the price you pay every time you abandon a small piece of yourself in exchange for acceptance. The scary part is that most people pay it every single day without even noticing. They laugh at jokes they don't find funny. They pretend to enjoy things they secretly dislike. They agree with opinions they don't believe. They hide interests they think others will judge. They change how they speak, how they dress, how they act depending on who's around. None of these actions feel significant in the moment. They seem harmless. But confidence isn't built from giant moments. Confidence is built from thousands of tiny interactions with yourself. Every action teaches your brain something about who you are. Psychologists discovered something fascinating about human behavior many decades ago. In the 1950s, psychologist Solomon Asch conducted one of the most famous experiments in social psychology. Participants were shown a simple line comparison task. The correct answer was obvious. Yet when actors in the room intentionally gave the wrong answer, many participants followed the group instead of trusting their own eyes. Think about that for a second. People were willing to doubt what they could clearly see simply to avoid standing apart from everyone else. Around 75% of participants conformed at least once during the experiment. Not because they were stupid, not because they were weak, because they were human. The lesson wasn't just that people follow crowds. The deeper lesson was that the desire for social acceptance is incredibly powerful. Our ancestors survived in tribes. Being rejected by the group wasn't uncomfortable. It was dangerous. For thousands of years, fitting in increased the chances of survival. Being excluded could mean death. Even though modern life has changed dramatically, our brains still carry those ancient survival systems. In many situations, your brain reacts to social rejection as if it's a genuine threat. Studies have even shown that social pain activates some of the same brain regions associated with physical pain. That's why criticism can sting. That's why embarrassment can feel overwhelming. That's why speaking honestly sometimes feels terrifying even when nothing dangerous is actually happening. The problem is that what once helped us survive can now quietly sabotage our confidence. Every time you ignore your real thoughts to gain approval, your brain receives a message. It starts collecting evidence. Evidence that your opinions aren't important. Evidence that your authentic self isn't acceptable. Evidence that you need permission from others before expressing yourself. Over time, those messages become beliefs. And beliefs become identity. This idea connects to another fascinating psychological theory called self-perception theory, proposed by psychologist Daryl Bain. The theory suggests that we often figure out who we are by observing our own behavior. Most people assume behavior follows identity. They think, I feel confident, therefore I act confidently. But sometimes the reverse is true. Sometimes your brain watches what you do and then creates conclusions about who you must be. If you constantly avoid speaking up, your brain may conclude that your opinions aren't valuable. If you constantly seek approval, your brain may conclude that other people's judgments matter more than your own. If you repeatedly hide your personality, your brain may eventually assume that your real personality must be flawed. Think about how powerful that is. Imagine two people entering the same room. One speaks honestly even when there's a risk of disagreement. The other constantly edits themselves to fit in. After years of repeating those behaviors, who do you think develops more self-trust? Confidence isn't magic. Confidence is evidence. It's the result of repeatedly proving to yourself that you'll stand by who you are. This is where most self-improvement advice gets confidence completely wrong. We're told to speak louder, stand taller, make more eye contact, use powerful body language. While some of those things can help, they're not the foundation of confidence. Plenty of loud people are insecure. Plenty of quiet people are deeply confident. Confidence isn't volume. Confidence isn't charisma. Confidence isn't dominance. Confidence is self-trust. It's knowing that your worth doesn't disappear the moment someone disagrees with you. One of the biggest misconceptions is that confident people don't care what others think. That's not true. Everyone cares to some extent. Humans are social creatures. The difference is that confident people don't let other people's opinions outrank their own values. They listen without surrendering. They consider feedback without abandoning themselves. They can tolerate disapproval because they've stopped treating approval as proof of worth. What's interesting is that most of us weren't born lacking confidence. If you've ever watched children, you'll notice something remarkable. They sing before they're good at singing. They dance before they're good at dancing. They ask strange questions without worrying how they sound. They wear ridiculous outfits and proudly show them off. People often look at children and say, wow, they're so confident. But that's not actually what's happening. Children aren't necessarily confident. They simply aren't constantly monitoring themselves. They haven't yet developed the habit of viewing every action through the imagined judgment of others. As we grow older, self-consciousness increases. We become more aware of social expectations. We learn what gets rewarded and what gets criticized. Slowly, many people start replacing authenticity with performance. Instead of asking, what do I think? They start asking, what will people think of me? And that single shift changes everything. Imagine carrying a backpack. Every time you censor yourself, a small stone goes into the backpack. 1 stone doesn't feel heavy. 10 stones don't feel heavy. But after years of adding stones, you wonder why life feels exhausting. You wonder why expressing yourself feels difficult. You wonder why confidence feels out of reach. The answer isn't that you were born insecure. The answer might be that you've been carrying too much weight. Research on authenticity consistently finds links between authentic living and higher levels of psychological well-being, life satisfaction, and healthier relationships. This makes sense when you think about it. Pretending is exhausting. Maintaining a version of yourself designed to please everyone requires constant effort. Authenticity, on the other hand, creates alignment. Your thoughts, words, and actions begin moving in the same direction. And alignment creates energy. Ironically, many people hide parts of themselves because they're afraid others won't like them. Yet authenticity is often what makes people genuinely interesting. Think about the people you admire most. Chances are they're not admired because they're universally approved. They're admired because they're unmistakably themselves. They have opinions. They have quirks. They have traits that some people dislike. But they stop trying to become a human version of customer service. The truth is that confidence often feels uncomfortable at first. That's because confidence isn't the absence of fear. Confidence is acting in alignment with yourself despite fear. The first time you express an unpopular opinion, it feels awkward. The first time you stop fake laughing, it feels awkward. The first time you stop apologizing unnecessarily, it feels awkward. But awkwardness isn't evidence that you're doing something wrong. Sometimes awkwardness is simply evidence that you're breaking an old pattern. Here's a challenge. For the next 24 hours, pay attention to every moment when you're tempted to edit yourself unnecessarily. Notice when you pretend to agree. Notice when you laugh automatically. Notice when you stay silent even though you have something meaningful to say. Don't become rude. Don't become reckless. Just become aware. Then choose one moment to be slightly more honest than usual. One moment. That's all. I think back to that moment years ago when I nodded along with a group even though I didn't agree. Looking back, the topic wasn't important. What mattered was the habit. The habit of choosing acceptance over authenticity. The habit of abandoning myself in tiny ways. That's the thing about confidence. Most people spend years trying to find it when they've actually been giving it away. So, that's it. Think better. Live better.